Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio, our live broadcast from the We Want to Live rally and march. This is Tony B, and I am with Derrick Wheeler. Derrick, let's talk about the role, and I know that initially I think you were one of the people who had an early conversation with the mayor, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong about that.
No.
Okay.
No conversation with the mayor. I do work with the county, though. I work for Zero Youth Detention, but I'm a community member. I've grown up, spent all my life here. My family has been here, the Wheelers, instrumental in Zion Preparatory Academy. My father, Doug Wheeler, many people are familiar with my family. My brother, Dominic Davis, and several other leaders came together because we felt like something needed to happen in our community where we needed to organize and come together as a collective, one, to stop the violence that's happening in our communities. We've had so many young people dying. Matter of fact, we've had more young people die Q1 of this year than we have the last 5 years in South King County. So we've been organizing literally around a regional approach to gun violence. We've got both the county and city. There's 17 different departments that have come together from Superior Court to the prosecuting attorney's office to the Human Services Department, public health. I can't even name them all, right, who have all come together literally to come with a comprehensive plan around how we can address violence in our community. And so we wanted to really come together, though, as people from the community with the community hat on to say, let's stop killing each other, but we're also not going to stand for state-sanctioned violence and police brutality.
You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. That's my man, Derrick Wheeler. Derrick, I want to ask you a question because, as you know, this is not new. This has been something that has been going on. I've given my opinion on it. I've talked to Rick. I've talked to Nikita Oliver. I talked to Tia. Give me your perspective on what can be done to make this more than just a movement and turn it into a movement. And do you see this as something different? Do you see this as a paradigm shift in the attitudes of people? One of the things, again, that I've noticed is unashamedly, when I was at Franklin High School, when I saw all those black, brown, white people together demonstrating, rallying, it wasn't about equity. It wasn't about equality. It was about saving black lives. And I found that to be something unique and different about this particular movement that's going on here.
Yeah, I think you really hit it on the head. I think one of the things that we've had a difficult time doing is isolating race and explicitly talking about race. And most often, black lives gets lost in this conversation of people of color, and we're not acknowledging the fact that there are some specific things to black folks when we start talking about anti-blackness and the way that a white supremacist system was designed. And when we look at all of these statistical categories that reflect the social determinants of health, black people are literally at the bottom of every one of those categories. And so until we can isolate this conversation, there are some specific things that the government has to do in relationship to black people. And so I'm grateful that there are people that are now recognizing that this conversation has to happen. I think that we look at COVID-19 as a disruptor. Not only has it been a disruptor, but it's also been an accelerator. I think we're watching things happen right now in our time that literally would have taken another 5, 10, maybe 15 years to happen. And so the question is...
Maybe 20 years, maybe 50 years.
Absolutely.
It's ironic because you have people in your family who've been fighting against this very same thing so that you wouldn't have to, but yet here you are.
Yeah, here I am, and I recognize that I stand on the shoulders of giants. And so while it's been exhausting because I've been working during the day and then literally organizing at night, running on fumes, but I can't help but think about my ancestors and all of the tumultuous turmoil and all of the things that they fought for. I stand on their shoulders, and so I dare not, right, tire. I'm absolutely inspired by the amount of people that have galvanized and come here. And I think what we really want to do is be able to shift this so that it's not just a moment, but a movement. And so we want to organize. We want to continue to make sure that we're on the same page. We've got demands. And we want to address these social determinants of health in our communities. We don't just want money to fund programs. By funding programs, you're only addressing the symptoms. We want to deal with cures. We want racism to be recognized and acknowledged as a public health crisis. And when we can declare that and begin to own that, it's then that we can start to center some of these things and we can start talking about the equity and the quality of life for our young people in a sustainable way, and how do we systematize that.
Awesome talking to you, Derrick. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for what you're doing. But the reality of it is this has been work that you have been doing all along. Now people see the urgency of it. And I want to give you a chance here for final words, if you'd like to say anything that you'd like to say. Again, one of the things that has happened with COVID-19 and with this is that we now have people paying attention. We have demonstrated and rallied and marched in Seattle every night, somewhere in this city. And if there's anything that you want to say now to our listeners, they're not only local. Yes, Rainier Avenue Radio represents Rainier Avenue. That's who we are. That's what we do. But I know that a lot of you are having the opportunity to tune in and find out what's happening here because you want to do things in your community, whether it's Spokane or whether it's Everett or whether it's Lacey or whether it's Yakima. We all have some of the same struggles. Derrick, just again, final words to the big audience.
Well, I think that folks think that we're here rallying, and while Brother George Floyd is a catalyst, we've been experiencing this pain. It's been 400 years of a dysfunctional relationship with America. And so we're still grieving from Emmett Till. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just that America is now paying attention to the harm that's been caused and that's been created. And we're glad that folks are paying attention and that now we're at a moment in time where we're willing to listen to the wounds of the black body. And if we listen to the wounds of the black body and we understand the pain of black people, then it's then that we'll galvanize and organize in ways that we understand that we're not free until we're all free.
My man, good luck. Much continued success. And who do we have
No
here?
justice. No justice. The rest of the world thinks we're crying over George Floyd, but the truth is we still haven't gotten over Emmett Till. In my hand, I hold a stake from the train tracks in Money, Mississippi that Emmett Till and his cousins ran over, leaving the store Bryant Market. And just on the other side of those tracks are where Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam drug his body, beat him till he was unrecognizable, and dropped him in the Tallahatchie River. He was so maimed, the only thing his mama could identify him by was a ring that he was wearing. And so excuse black folks if we're tired, but we've lost track of the actual count on black bodies that have been lost to white supremacy. For the sake of the conversation today, when I speak of whiteness, I'm not so much talking about property of skin as much as I am a social power that reproduces its dominance in both explicit and implicit ways. Carolyn Bryant was using the same dog whistle politics on Emmett Till when she lied on him that Amy Cooper, the white woman in Central Park, used when she called the cops on a black man less than a week ago, only proves that we're simply an endangered species even by when we're bird watching. And I just want to say black folks are getting free out here. We're bird watching, y'all. I used to call that white people stuff until my elder and mentor, Cortland Butt, stopped me and said, Smitty, is it white people stuff or is it the way humans who have never been oppressed move through the earth? But when whiteness becomes a practice or an exercise, it will use its superiority over the black body and will monopolize the power of destroying and demeaning bodies of color. The legal system is engaged in reproducing whiteness when it decides that the black person can and will be punished more severely than the white person who commits the same infraction. And I keep this stake simply as a reminder to my first trip to Lake Providence, Louisiana to visit my grandmother, where the last thing she told me before going out to side to play with new friends in the neighborhood was to make sure that I never crossed over those tracks. Well, I want to say today I'm still crossing over those tracks as I work in white institutions where emotions are political, and so I'm asked to be an exceptional Negro with a non-emotive face, sharing in a tone that comforts white fragility, exhausted and enraged, constantly having to comport myself, because if I don't, all of the good work that's been happening can be overlooked in a flash because some white woman says, I don't feel safe. Which actually perverts the truth of historical oppression in this country. As a matter of fact, the safest person in this space is a white woman. And to our white brothers and sisters who want to be allies in the space today, please know that in order to be an ally, you must first understand that you can't have a positive white identity, because a positive white identity doesn't exist outside of white supremacy. What we need from you is to listen and to be a little less certain, a little less ignorant, and to show up more humble and more curious. As part of your socialization into whiteness has you functionally illiterate and ill-informed when it comes to race. And so we need you to listen to the wounds of the black body. I just want to say that I'm intentionally centering the black body in this space today because there is something profoundly anti-black about white supremacy, as black is always the other, and the darker you are in this country, the greater the oppression. And I'm not apologizing for it. I'm just serving you notice. And so I'm not going to use terms today like people of color, as all black people are people of color, but all persons of color are not black. And non-black persons of color and black indigenous people of color still benefit from and can practice anti-black racism. Listen, black folks are the only group of people in this country who experienced chattel slavery, had their learning codified and were severely punished for learning, and had an entire system built to our demise. And that system wanted to ensure that we are at the bottom of every well-being indicator in this country. And so we must explicitly talk about race and isolate race, not because other groups don't have challenges in this country, but because black Americans have specific issues that need to be addressed by the United States government. And so we must move away from white supremacist thinking and language on our way to liberation. White supremacy thinking has a strong autocorrect on it. And so we must contend with the fact that when the Constitution said "we the people," it was referencing white land-owning males, and that the institutions in this country are built to support that line of thinking. And so all of our institutions were not designed to protect the people, but they were designed to protect the wealthy and the status quo. This is why there is not such an uproar over targets being looted and burned down, and folks crying over a burning target, and my people have been a target in this country for 400 years. The highest value in dominant culture is the object, and the object is power, money, and control, not life. And so we may have changed some of our language and how we talk about race, but this country is still doing what it was built to do centuries ago. And I just want to say that the goal is not a better form of slavery. So we need to watch out for some of these black folks who say they are representing the black community, who have no intentions on ending white supremacy. They just want to improve their position in it and get rewarded for showing up like that. We've got one message, and it's the same message our forefather Moses pulled up on the set with, and that is, let my people go. Today, as an African people, we stand on the shoulders of strong, committed visionaries and ancestors who toiled and struggled, who pioneered and who died that we might be able to stand in this space right now this evening. And we can trace that commitment to the dawn of civilization, when our African foreparents raised pyramids over the sandy shores of the Nile and charted and named the constellations of outer space. Or we can go back 500 years ago to the West African city of Timbuktu, when the people between the 10th and the 16th centuries made the University of Sankore, in that town the leading institution of higher education in the world. Or we can go back just 100 and some odd years ago during the mob rule, lynch law, chain gang, KKK, ride on the back of the bus, go in through the back door, drink from the colored water fountain era, where my ancestors were not allowed by law to read or to write, or to attend schools, or to be found in the possession of learning materials. But they so loved and were so committed to the idea of learning that they would on a regular basis risk having a finger cut off of their hand, or a hand sawed off from their wrist, or an ear torn from their head, or the hot brand of an iron applied to their faces. They would go sneaking and crawling, ducking and dodging through cane brakes and cotton patches in the midnight hour just to be able to read over the flickering light of a candle or an oil lamp. In that era, my grandparents, Leon and Ruby Flowers of Lake Transylvania, Louisiana, served on the Wilton plantation. My grandfather, Leon, died on that plantation saving cattle during a flood when the levee rose. And it's ironic because in those times, that cattle was thought to have more value than my grandfather's life. As a child, I would regularly have nightmares of drowning. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that my mother explained that one night I had a usual nightmare of drowning. Only this time she said, I told her, Mommy, there were horses in the water. She was immediately triggered and tried to hold herself as best as she could as a mother from not exploding from the pain. And it wasn't until she got me back to sleep that she could address and understand the legacy of trauma that had been passed down to me from a grandfather that I had never met. And we now know through science that epigenetics is trauma, that it leaves a chemical mark on a person's genes, which is then passed down to subsequent generations. That one little manifestation as a child has me wondering how many dysfunctional adaptations in the black community can be linked to the crimes that were visited upon our ancestors. And so we have researchers and scientists and doctors who can now draw a direct link to the fact that systemic racism releases toxins which starts to erode systems in the body. Toxins that erode our neurological health. And for anybody wondering about neurological health, meditation, prayer, and storytelling can support your mental health. And so can seeing a psychologist, something that we have pretended was or has been taboo in the black community. But what happens in your life when you are treated every day with less courtesy than other people? Treated with less respect, receive poorer service at restaurants or stores. People act as if they think you're not smart. They act like they're afraid of you, or they act like they think you're dishonest, or they act like they think they're better than you are, or you're called names or insulted or threatened and harassed. What happens when that is your day-to-day experience? Have you ever had 12 get behind you or a cop get behind you only to pop the cherries and your neck and shoulders tighten and your breath picks up and your heart starts beating twice as fast? And all that is a psychological absorption from racism manifesting physically in your body. Biologically, it starts to erode our blood cells. Listen, telomeres are parts to the blood cells, and they released a report showing that 25-year-old black men have parts of their blood cells that accelerate at a rate that equals that of a 50-year-old white woman. So many of you are saying this is good information. What's your point, Smitty? Personal experiences of discrimination and institutional racism have added these pathogenic factors that affect health in multiple ways. And everyday discrimination, the doctors can now show that it has a direct tie to coronary artery calcification, to C-reactive protein, blood pressure, lower birth weight, cognitive impairment, poor sleep, and the mortality of the black body. So not only are we dealing with the pandemic of COVID-19, but we're dealing with the pandemic of racism, and it's time to declare racism a public health crisis. And don't just declare it a public health crisis, but do something about it. Through public health data, it is now proven that your zip code is a larger predictor of your mortality rate, of how long you will live. Not your DNA, but your zip code. Residential segregation is a striking legacy of racism. Not only are we talking about the forced removal and relocation of indigenous people, but let's talk about the forced removal of black people from the Central District. And look, I know we in the South End, and yeah, I'm South End too, but my grandparents had a house on 31st and Jefferson. So you can say whatever you want to say, but all black folks in Seattle started in the CD. Do your homework, baby. Listen, people didn't trip and fall into poor communities. folks didn't accidentally stumble into the barrios and ghettos of America. Ghettos are a social construct of the American government through tactics like redlining and building up the white middle class in the 40s, 50s, and 60s with home loans. And now we have a baby boomer generation of white folks who are set to transfer $30 trillion of wealth to younger generations over the next few years. Assets that were accumulated during a time when our ancestors were not allowed to own land. Not allowed to own land in a country that they built. So you systemically lock black folks into a real-life monopoly game where all the wealth and power has been skewed. So we never got our 40 acres and a mule, and we don't own any land. And in the game of monopoly, if you don't have any money, that means you don't get to put hotels and houses on the land. So when you roll the dice and you come up on the wrong piece of property, you're only left with two alternatives. You either go bankrupt or you go to jail. And when you only have two opportunities in life, which one is to go bankrupt and the other is to go to jail, that is called an underclass. And black folks in this country have been forced into an underclass. Perhaps we're calling it the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. In the face of 400 years of oppression, I just need to say this. There is not a more resilient people to walk the face of this earth. Black folks are essential to this country, much like water is essential to life. In the middle of this COVID-19, who do you think were the essential folks that kept everyday life going? Only 19% of black folks could work from home during this pandemic. I would call that essential. Black slave laborers built America's infrastructure, including its buildings, roads, bridges, railways. Black folks built America, just as we built the pyramids in Egypt and then gave civilization to the European. I would say that's essential. We birthed every genre of music in this country. I would say that's essential. We produced sugar and cotton and tobacco, which created Wall Street and is still being publicly traded as trillions of dollars exchange hands every day. I would call that. We cooked in your kitchens. Our women breastfed your babies. Folks envy our broad shoulders and our big lips and our wide noses. And everybody wants to be black until it's time. Black folks are essential. Essential to this country in many ways like water. Think about it. Water is the most important of the four elements because the other four need water. But water can maintain life on its own. So important is water that 3/5 of the earth's surface is water. Essential. 65% of the human body is water. 70% of a tree is water. 80% of an elephant is what? 95% of a tomato is what? So when God made water on the second day of creation, he placed within water a self-recycling dynamic so that water, that God has not had to come back and make another drop of water since then. And as a matter of fact, there is no scientist, no chemist anywhere in the world who can create a single drop of water. You can't even destroy water, no matter how you waste it, boil it, burn it, or throw it away. Spilled water will descend beneath the crusty surface of the earth into the subterranean bowels of the geological strata, rise again in the form of vapors, reach coolness of the stratosphere, form a cumulonimbus, and pour itself again upon the face of the earth. And so it is with black folks who survived being chained to other human bodies for several months in the bottom of disease-infested ships during the Middle Passage, lost our language, customs, and traditions,
picked up the English language as best as we could while working free of charge from sun up to sundown, as they watched babies sold from their arms and women raped by ruthless slave owners. We took names with no last names, no birth certificates, no heritage of any kind. We braved the Underground Railroad, survived the Civil War to enter into sharecropping, learned to read and write out of sheer will and determination, faced the burning crosses of the KKK, everted their eyes at black bodies swinging from ropes hung on trees, fought in world wars only to return to America as boys. Marched in Birmingham, hosed in Selma, jailed in Wilmington, assassinated in Memphis, segregated in the South, ghettoed in the North, ignored in history books, stereotyped in Hollywood. And you can throw in COVID-19, and despite it all, much like water, you can't destroy us. And I just want to say that America will not miss her water until her well has run dry. Black folks have been to America what water has been to the world, essential to its survival. And much like we have built this country, we must now build our own. Despite the ugly history of this country, the grace, resilience, and beauty of black folks is undeniable. I want to say to the black women that are here today, we respect you, we support you, we value you, we love you. Now listen, you can do better than that. If you're going to give black women some love, then give them some love. Malcolm X said the most disrespected person in America is the black woman. He also said that you and I as men will never be recognized as men until we stand up like men and place the same penalty over the heads of anyone who puts their filthy hands out in the direction of our women and our children. We've got to destroy this negative energy that's pitted against each other, and I'm almost done. Listen, all religious texts in this world, regardless of your faith, all religious texts have a recurring theme that says, look at nature. The world is a Bible, and all we have to do is watch the masculine and feminine principles play out. Without the personal choice of mankind, they are aligned with the cosmos, and they do exactly what they were called to do, which is cross-pollinate. That is exactly how you grow things. So what am I saying? We have to pay attention to the sciences, because every energy has a masculine and feminine principle. So we must pay attention to the messages that are coming from the feminine aspect. Oh yeah, you can clap right there. See, because the masculine principle creates space, and it provides the opening such that the feminine principle can take seed, nurture, and grow. And out of that, the feminine seed then feeds the masculine seed as the two form a symbiotic relationship. That's just basic science. But we want to copy white supremacy and only allow the masculine seed to dominate, the masculine energy to dominate the space. Oh, y'all don't like me. Okay. You got quiet. You can hear a rat pissing on cotton. What I'm saying is we can't grow the movement if we can't heal. And if you have hurt a black woman, when you leave from here tonight, I want you to commit to calling her and apologizing. Whether it's a black woman to a black woman or a black man to a black woman. And if you are a black man here today and you're committed to protecting our women, I want you to raise your right hand and to take this pledge. We are committed to act as advocates, never turning from the path of freedom. We will create space to bring harmony with our presence, to always do justice with our deeds. We will uphold you to bring forth a new time, to shape our own history, and work without pause until our last breath. We love you with everything that we've got. Now, if you seal that covenant, won't you put your hands together in this space? I want to speak to all of the young people who are here under the sound of my voice. I drove by Franklin and Friday. Shout out to all of my fellow Quakers. Don't get mad, man. There's only two kinds of people, Quakers and wannabes. Listen, I was blown away by the advocacy of those young people who were moved to advocate for change. And I just want to say to all of the young people that are here today, I am inspired by your bravery. I am inspired by your passion, by your energy, by your inspiration, your creativity, your innovation, and your desire as a generation to leave the world better than you found it. Adults, every adult in here, I want you to imagine that upon your arrival at an airline ticket counter, that you are told that only 65% of the flights to your destination actually arrive, and that the remainder of them crash en route. And that if you're black, indigenous, a child of color, or poor, you're required to fly on special, poorly maintained planes, of which only 35% make it. That sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly the deal that we as a nation are serving up daily to millions of kids in public schools. And I want to repent as an adult and as a leader in this community to all of the black youth in the space today. We as elders have failed to create for you a beloved community. We fail to protect you as we send you every day into unsafe spaces. We know that the educational system is delivering on a deliberate design. It's a predetermined rigged system, and we already know who's going to end up in whatever category. But it reminds me that this isn't so much about interrupting a school-to-prison pipeline as it is about interrupting a business plan. I just want to say to all of the young men who feel trapped in the struggle that you have to have an imagination big enough to believe that you're not going to be a victim of a racist system. In closing, I want to speak to one of the most ancient of our institutions, the black church, the only institution to survive slavery. None of the other major structures of African society survived the horrors of the Middle Passage and the agonies of slavery. And I just want to say that this contemporary black church is a vast repository of underdeveloped resources in the form of people, talent, and monies. We need leaders who will pastor communities and not just churches. I said we need leaders who will pastor communities and not just churches. We have become gatekeepers of a failing empire instead of prophets of resistance. And so without knowing it, many have become cogs in the wheel of white supremacy. The church has become Babylon instead of the bride of Christ. And if you look in Revelation 17, it talks about the whore Babylon. Well, see, here's the difference between the whore and the bride of Christ that the Bible talks about. A whore will stay up all night and pimp and preen to look good. Doesn't care about having a relationship. Isn't going to see you out in the streets and say, "Hi, John." Isn't trying to bear your name or have any kids. In other words, the goal isn't to reproduce anything. But here's what she will do. She'll turn on her light in the night, and if you pay her, she'll make you feel good. Sounds familiar, right? Because it happens every Sunday across this city. The Bible says foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man have nowhere to lay his head. Listen, foxes go into holes to reproduce. Birds don't live in nests. Birds make nests so that they can lay eggs to do what? If you're not reproducing anything in the community, then what is your value? So what if all black churches, singly or in groups, committed to themselves to establishing endowment scholarships with $200,000 as the minimum goal, and the amount of interest could provide money to all kinds of educational costs for 3 to 4 kids a year, and families and block clubs and neighborhood associations and businesses and secret societies all did the same. We could actually create the kind of internal development into the future of our broken community and into our economy. As I wrap up, I remember spending some time over in Africa. And one of the most accomplished and fabled tribes in Africa is the Maasai tribe. And no tribe is considered to have warriors as more fearsome or more intelligent than the mighty Maasai. And I'll never forget that while we were in Kenya, we visited a very remote area where the people reject whiteness, and they maintain their way of life. And the Maasai warriors, they walk around with these spears, right, these weapons. And I noticed that every time that they would pass each other with their mug on mean, they would say to each other, Kasidi and Injera. And so I asked Malatia, who I call Unk, which in Swahili is Jombe, what are they saying? He said, they're asking each other, and how are the children? And I want to center the black body in this, and I want to say, how are the black children? It is still the traditional greeting today among the Maasai, acknowledging that the high value of life that the Maasai place on their children's well-being, that even warriors with no children of their own will always give the traditional answer in response to it, all the children are well. Meaning, of course, that peace and safety prevail, that the priorities of protecting the young, the powerless are in place, that Maasai society has not forgotten its reason for being, and that its proper functions and responsibilities are in place because all the children are well. What that means is that life is good. It means that the daily struggle for existence do not preclude the proper caring for their young. I wonder how might it affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare and our culture if we took to greeting each other every day with this question: how are the black children? What if we heard that question passed along to each other 10, 20, 30, 40 times a day? I wonder if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how black children are thought of and cared about in this country. What if every adult, every parent among us, non-parent alike, felt the equal weight for the daily care and protection of the children in our community, in our town, in our state, in our country? I wonder if we could just practice that right now in this space. I'm going to ask you, and how are the black children? To which you will respond, all the black children are well. How are the black children? How are the black children? Cue me up, Key. So if that's the answer to our question, then what we want to know is that yes, all the children are well. And when we can say that all the children are well, it's then that we can actualize the words of the great prophet Kendrick Lamar.
All's my life I has to fight, nigga.